Hi, I'm Marie Eldridge, and this is the 1/4 inch by 6 inch line grid ruler. This has a big gap in the center that sets up the distance between piano keys or grids or whatever you're doing. I love how this ruler works. So first of all, I'm going to do one of my favorites, and that's just, I've stitched out some feathers here. I'm going to make lines that come into it. They're similar to a piano key. In order to get the same gap that I had before, because I had to stop, all I have to do is put my needle down where my last stitch line was. All right, now we'll bring in the line grid ruler. Okay, so you have to have your needle up. You're going to take that gap across the hopping foot. I'm going to line up. I have my needle down right in the last seam that I stitched. I'm going to bring it up so that it'll line up. It has a space at the bottom, so that'll give me a flat line across the bottom. It gives that 1/4 inch spacing for the ruler. Now I'm just going to, the best way for me to do this is to always stitch towards the gap. So I'm putting the gap to this side, so I always know that's my spacing. So I'm going across until I stop, and then I slide the ruler. This is always the side that I stitch on. This is always the side that I set up my gap. And I remind myself, because that's where the gap is in the ruler. It doesn't mean that you can't stitch there. It just helps me to remember. And once I talk to myself a lot while I'm doing this. And when you get to that point, you don't have to talk to yourself, and you remind yourself, this is the stitch, this is the gap. Then you can use either side. It doesn't really matter. To do this, I stitch up to the feather, and now I'm going to stitch back on the same line. And then I don't have to try and go around that curve on the feather. Now I'm going to go towards the gap. So I set up that spacing and then move the ruler over. So I'm right tucked into this back corner back here. I'm flat along the bottom of the ruler, and I'm even with the side of the ruler. Now I can just stitch on that stitch side, straight up, straight back, and I have it set up so the space or the gap goes this way. I'll stitch to the gap, move my ruler over till it locks right into the bottom of that hopping foot, straight up, back on the same line, set up my gap, slide the ruler over, up to the feather, back till I hit the ruler, which is also this straight line that's along here. Now I'm going to stitch over. It's time for my spacing or the gap. Slide my ruler over, up to the feather, back on the same line, and over to the gap to the other corner. So the ruler pretty much makes it so you look really, really good. It just keeps you straight one direction and straight across the bottom. So there's my last one, and we'll just pull that off, and you can see how that finished that off. So see how nice that looks, where it just comes right into the feather, and each of these are spaced exactly the same, and I didn't have to mark it. The ruler does all the work for you and makes you look so good. I hope you can see these little Christmas trees, how cute they look. I use the line grid ruler just to do the straight part, and then I'm all about adding to, right? Just to add some to the outside, add some little curls and some little kind of loops there, and it just makes it just cute. I could see doing a whole border with that. All right. Just because it has a 1/4 inch gap in this line grid ruler doesn't mean you have to always do a 1/4 inch. So what I've done here is a 1/4 inch, a 1/4 inch, a 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch. And the way you do that, I'm going to set this up. I can go to the last line that I stitched, and that's how I know I can set up exactly the same spacing. I'm going to bring in my line grid ruler, putting the gap towards this side because that's the way my spacing is going. I'm lining up so that I have my hopping foot at the bottom. I'm lined up on the line I just stitched, and I want to go towards, I need to add that 1/2 inch spacing. So I'm going to go a 1/4 inch, and then I'm going to slide the ruler again. That gives me that 1/2 inch. Now I'm against this side, but that's not my stitching side. Let's get those threads out of the way. All right. All right, now I have the ruler against the stitching side. I also have 1/4 inch lines on this side that I can make sure that I'm going straight. So now I'm going to do that line, and then I can stitch across. Now I can move the top of the ruler down so that it keeps me straight, or I can just go those 4 stitches across there. I know what the spacing is. It's given me that 1/4 inch. If I move my line grid ruler over, I'm stitching along the straight side. Now I'm going towards the gap. That's that 1/4 inch gap. So now I've sewed 2 lines. I'm going to sew the 3rd one, and I'm going to go towards the gap. So that's my first 1/4 inch, and now I'm going to do it one more time, making sure that I'm lined up, that I'm going straight. And now I'm going to move my ruler over, so I've set the gap. Now I'm going to stitch straight down. It's just that easy to set it up so that you get 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch, and then a 1/2 inch. You can do a lot of different variety with your piano keys with this ruler. So I really like this line grid. Okay, so here is another trick. You can do it on an angle. You can do 1 line, 2 lines, 4 lines, 3 lines. But the one thing I did find was doing it on an angle. So you're just going to set up the same way. Let's just start at that last stitch line that I did. That gives me that even spacing. So I don't have to figure out the spacing. The ruler will do it for me. So I'm going to bring it in. Okay, this is my stitch side, this is my spacing side. So I have my ruler set so that I'm lined up to stitch that line. If I were to stitch right down that line, it would stitch right over it again. All right, now I'm just going to move across to where the gap is. So that's that 1/4 inch. But if I want to, then I will just move it over. So I'm ready for a 1/2 inch. I'll go to the gap side of the ruler, move my ruler over because this is the side I'm stitching on. Make sure everything is straight, which with this ruler, I also have lines that go this way that I can line up with my box. I also have 45-degree angles, all of those. Now I'm just going to follow the box shape down to the gap side, move my ruler over, and I'm doing the angles. Okay, now we'll move across to the gap, so that sets up my spacing. Move my ruler over and stitch on the straight side of the ruler. So if I move that out of the way, you can see this is the one that I double stitched, and you can see my spacing stayed the same because I had that, the ruler sets up that gap for you. I love how you don't have to measure, it just sets it up. All right, look over here. See this little grid? 1/4 inch spacing going this way. Turn your grid ruler the other way and you have the opposite direction, so you've set up a crosshatch. And you look at that and you go, what would I ever do that on? Well, I'm not going to do a whole quilt like that, but look at these cute little apples. Look at these apples with the hearts in the center. Totally, I would do a little grid like that inside of a shape. And look how it sets it off. So easy to do, and I'm only doing 8 or 10 little grids there. So that's a great design to use, again, to finish off your quilt. All right. This one up here, obviously these are not a 1/4 inch apart, but this lines can be a background fill. And that's exactly what I've done here, was just like down with the first feather, only this time I'm just going to use the ruler to make a couple of stitches apart. So we'll get this started. We'll start right here on this edge. I've done my locking stitch. Now I'm just going to bring the line grid ruler in. This time I want it to be straight across the top, so I can just sink my needle And then if I bring my ruler to it, I know that I'm going to be square across the top. For this one, I'm just going to go down till I hit the feather, straight back on the same line. I'm going towards the gap, so I'm just going to go like 2 stitches, move my ruler over, this is my stitch side, straight down till I hit the feather, back up till I'm straight and square at the top, which is keeping me square there. Now I need to set my gap, so I just go towards that, 2 stitches, move my ruler over so that I stitch on this side, straight down, straight back up on the same line. And we're just using this as another fill. This is just a great fill, the way that sets up that feather, and it just accents it so much. Okay, one more time, I'll go towards the gap, about 2 stitches. I'm going to move the ruler so that I'm right into that secured corner, and down and back up. Oh, look how cute that looks. I love how that sets that feather off. And it's just so easy. It looks like a lot of lines and like it would take a long time, but really you can move across there just setting it up, doing those little stitches really quick. All right, this I would totally do in a quilt, and we'll end by showing you a quilt that has that in it. But here's if we have a corner on our quilt. So I would just draw a line across the center of there. I've started with a piano key coming down this way and in this way, and this is one of those that I've alternated. So there's 3 lines, 2 lines, 3 lines, 2 lines. Across the corner, I'm going to draw that diagonal line. Let's see if we can get it dark enough you can see it. All right. If I start on that last line I stitched, the ruler will do the measuring for me. Oh, that's why I love this, because it sets it up. We'll put that on. We're going this direction. Line up so the bottom is flat and straight. And now I'm going to do my spacing, so I'll just stitch towards the gap in the ruler. That gives me 1 gap, and I think I'm on 2. I did these 3 together, so I'm going to move the ruler over. That'll give me a 1/2 inch, so 2 gaps in the center of there. And now I'm going to put the stitch side against my hopping foot, stitch until I hit that diagonal line. Then I can switch my ruler. I can just see exactly how I line up on this side. That's the thing I love about these rulers, is you have a lot of grid lines. All right, I'm facing the gap, so I'm going to make sure I have my ruler against there and stitch towards there. That gives me that 1/4 inch. Then move the stitch side of my ruler. You know, and like I said, you'll get used to this. You won't have to talk to yourself, and you won't have to keep switching your ruler. But for me, it just keeps it straight, so I don't have to think about it. So you can see how you would just continue that corner, and the ruler did all the measuring. I didn't have to mark. So the next one, I would come down 1 and just go over. All right, last thing I want to show you here is this circle, because it is so cute, and I totally would do this in the center of a motif. And it's the same thing. I can set it up by just putting my needle in where that last row was stitched. Then the ruler does the measuring. I know it's accurate, and I don't have to change. So I'm bringing in the line grid ruler. Oh, first I'm going to trim those threads though. All right, we'll bring in the ruler. And if I place it down, I know exactly that's where the line is. So if I stitch around the circle till I hit my gap, then I know that I've set up the spacing right. Now I move my ruler towards my hopping foot. That's the stitch side of the ruler. Go straight down till I hit the circle. So once the circle starts to bend, I'm going to follow that bend very slowly till I hit the other side of my ruler. That sets up that gap. That's my spacing. Move it over. There's my stitch side. Straight up. Oh man, this makes it just so easy. Back around the circle until I hit the other side of the ruler where the gap is. Move my ruler over to the stitch side. When it looks that easy, wouldn't you do that on a quilt? All right, so I'm going to show you a couple of different ways I've used these designs. So there's that little circle right there on the quilt. So easy, and it adds so much to this design. I did the outside with the Pro Stitcher, but this was all done part ruler and part Pro Stitcher. You can also see right here that this is doing on an angle using the line grid. And I've said before, if my fabric has a line that I can follow or it sets it up, I'm not going to fight that. And finally, this is just a block, but you can see I've used that line grid to do just a little piano key. It is such a great tool.